Hey guys, welcome back. This is going to be just a real quick tutorial. All we're going to do is show you how I dye the edges of my belts. A lot of people have trouble with this. You get dye on the back or dye on your liner on the top. You get it on your hands. It's really hard sometimes when you're dyeing edges on a belt or something long is to not get dye all over the thing. Now, if you're not dyeing your edges, that's absolutely great. I used to not dye all my edges just because it was easier. And I like that finished look. Now I've gone back to dyeing edges, so I kind of go back and forth, and it's completely personal preference what you like to see. So I like to keep a little jar of dye that's over here in my work area, but it's off to the side to where nobody can hit it off a table or something, or if it does fall off somehow or leak, or because it's going to leak on the bench. This bench has a lot of dye on it. And so if it does do that, it's over in an area where it's not going to get on some work I'm working on, or a saddle that we're working on or something like that. But I like to use a little small jar, like a baby food jar or something like that, and just put you a little bit of dye in there. If you keep the lid on, it'll stay fresh. We used to use the little Dixie cups, or the little cups that we dye with. If you've seen our paint and dye video, I used to use those, but they knock over so easy and you're moving them around, and sometimes you need to be in a different area than the dye table. So we just kind of keep a little jar of that over here. And then I use a dobber, and I keep the jar kind of away from my bench, so where if I'm moving things around, it doesn't get knocked over, or I can reach it though and get my dobber in there. And I use these little wool daubers, and one of these will last quite a while. When they start getting really hard, dye doesn't really dry like paint, so it takes a long time for them to get really hard and nasty. So I can use one of these for months really in the shop, and it's just kind of the one we use all the time. Once it gets kind of rough, we'll chunk it and get a new one. But what I do with those when you get a new dauber like this, what you want to do is you want to take this this new dauber. If you look really close, it's got a lot of fuzzies sticking out and stuff like that. When you start using it, those will give you less control when you're trying to get it on your edge and keep it only on the edge portion of a belt or a project. So what I like to do is take one of these and then just take a lighter and just lightly singe around the outside, and that will even up any little fuzzies. And you can do it a couple times if you want to. Don't burn them too much because they get hard. So over the years, you know, I've seen guys in the shop, they'd burn them just to burn them, I guess, I don't know, but they'd burn them way too much and they get really hard, and then it's hard to dye with. So it's just a real quick, just to singe all the little fuzz pieces that are hanging out there and stuff that can kind of impact your dye work negatively. We'll do that, and then so I'm gonna go ahead and use my old dye dauber that I've been using, and I just get a little bit of dye, not a lot, just get a little bit on there, and then I go ahead and I get my belt. Now I try to do it standing up, so I don't set it on the table and try to run it across there or anything like that. I just hold my belt, and what I'm trying to do is hold it as we get further. Right now it doesn't matter, there's no dye on here, but as you get further along in the dye process of a belt, you want to be sure that you're holding it like this, to where index finger, middle finger on the back side of the belt, and your thumb is in the middle of the top side of the belt. So that way your hand is not touching any edge anywhere. I know that sounds simple, but very easy to get dye on your hand, and then next time you move your hand, you get it on the liner or you get it on the top. So we want to be sure and hold it like that. And what I'll do is I'll start at the very top, and I will all I'm going to focus on right now is the very top of the portion that I'm dyeing, the edge that I'm dyeing. I'm not going to worry about getting it evenly on the bottom yet. I'm just going to worry about the top where I can see, and just really lightly just hit. I'm doing kind of shorter, light strokes along the edge, and being sure that I stay on the area of the edge that I edge with the edger. So you don't want to get up close to your stitches or up on top of the leather there. You just want to get the portion that you edged and slicked. And so we're just going to go along there and make sure that looks even. I don't know if you can see that really well, but what we're doing right here is real easy. Just going really easy right there. And so we'll do that all the way around this belt. As you can see from doing that, I never went back to my dye cup to get more dye. Now, if you need to on a bigger project or something, if your edge is thicker, you're going to use more dye, obviously go back. But I put very little dye on here, and I was able to dye the whole top edge all the way around, half of the bevel, so to speak. And I was able to do that with just a little bit of dye. So you don't need to fill this dauber full of dye. That's where you get dye everywhere, is because you've got way too much dye in that dauber. So I'm just putting it down, just that one little surface right there, and getting just a little bit, and then I kind of wipe it off on the edge of the jar, and that's just going to make it a little bit to where you have a little bit more control, and the dye is not going to wick all over your belt and just like suck up on the edge and stuff. So now if you look really closely on this, all we did was dye the very top half of the edge. This whole bottom end has not been dyed on the back side. So now I'll go ahead and do that. Now we'll do it the belt flipped over, and we'll go ahead and dye the top edge just like we did, or the bottom edge just like we did the top edge. So we'll go ahead now. I got me just a little bit more dye, and we do the back side exact same way, and we'll get the other half of our edge. And so you're basically cutting your edge in half. So you get the top edge where you got real control. You can't see the bottom, so don't worry about it. Just angle where you're getting the top. And now on the back side, we do the same thing just to get the other half. And like on this particular belt, it's not lined. It's a single ply belt. And so you've got to be really careful, because that rough outside of the leather will suck up any excess dye if you get too crazy with it. So you got to be kind of careful so it doesn't wick up inside there and get all over the place. And again, the key is here, as you can see, anytime I'm grabbing this belt, I'm grabbing it in the middle, or I have my finger up underneath there to where I'm not touching my edge. Now this dye, I use dye instead of edge paint. And the reason is because dye dries really fast and it absorbs, and it doesn't look thick and gummy. I'm not a big fan of edge paints, because they're just too thick and they look like paint on the edge, and I don't like that. To me, that kind of tries to cover up, which I think its intention is to cover up. It's to cover up edge work that's not quite as good. You know, you haven't spent the time slicking and making a really nice, clean sanded edge, and so that paint is supposed to cover that up so that it looks good. It's mainly for manufacturing because they don't have time to sit there and edge things, and I understand that. But when you're trying to do the best work that you can, I think dye is the better way to go if you do want a colored edge, and because it's going to make you much better. It's going to make you much better at slicking edges. And we have done a video on slicking edges as well as a blog article. So if you want to see those, if you haven't seen those yet, I'll put links in the description for that. As far as getting your edges nice and sanded and smooth and slicked down. All right, so that's both sides of the edge. So we'll put our dauber back over here where it goes. Put our lid back on our dye. 2 hands on your dye cans at all times. Whenever you're moving around your shop or moving it from bench to bench, put both hands on it. Just warning you, put both hands on it. Even then, sometimes you can drop it. But I always kind of put the lid on, hold it, move it to the bench. I try not to, when we go to fill that thing up, I'm very careful to hold it very well while walking. You think it's something simple, but you'll bump into a saddle horn walking by, or you'll stub your toe on the edge of your bench or something, and that thing will fall, and you'll get dye everywhere, and you'll never get it out of anything. So just be careful. Dye is dangerous. So now, as you can see on this edge, it's dyed all the way. Now, with a couple things, like I said, holding it properly, taking short light strokes on the belt with that, and working on the top half, and then turning the belt over and working on the bottom half. It'll meet in the middle, so that in the middle is easy. It's these top edges where your edger just stops and the top of the material begins. That's the area that you want to get with the dye. So you need to be sure you have a good clean dauber that's been burned down a little bit, and then just going easy and not using too much dye at a time. The thing with brown dye, if you are going to do brown on your edges, if you look at this really closely, and I don't know if you can see that in the video, but it does look a little like there's some dark spots and light spots and things like that. Normally I don't worry about that. Dark brown dye is just kind of hard that way. Even when you're dyeing, if you've dyed something larger like a little notebook or something like that, it goes in very uneven, and sometimes you have to go in and add some more in the lighter spots and stuff. And that's fine. I don't really worry about it on my edges as long as I'm going even. If I let it dry for a few minutes and come back and there's one spot that's obviously lighter, I'll add some more. Or if there's an area that's just really dark, then I'll go ahead and dye it again. And you can you can put 2 coats on here and get a more uniform edge. I don't want the edge to jump out, but I do want it to be subtle and clean. So I try to do one. If I can make one pass and it's good, then to me that's good, because that's a happy relationship from no dyed edge and just showing off a clean slicked edge to a dyed edge. It's kind of that sweet spot in the middle where it's got just enough hint of brown to it when it's a finished product that I think it's subtle and it looks good. If you're gonna do black, now this brown is almost all the way dry. I haven't sped up the video since we stopped dyeing, so that's the amount of time it takes for it to be dry. But what I would do is, I would just out of habit give it a few minutes to let it dry before you start hitting it with your finish. But I could virtually take this belt right now and put a finish on the edges, which I do. I go back with my tan coat, which is my finish of choice I use on everything, and I'll take that tan coat and do a final top coat on this belt before I put snaps in it, and I'll go ahead and hit my edges and my liner. This belt didn't have a liner, so we won't put that on here, but I'll do my edges too, and that'll kind of give it just a little bit more gloss and make it even a little bit more shiny and give it a little more finished look. If you're doing black dye for your edges, which I do a lot of on belts, the only thing to consider is black dye, like we've said in the past, is a pain. Like black dye is just a necessary evil. I hate it. I don't know about vinegaroon. I don't know if it does this. I don't even know if you can use that on edges. But black dye, just a professional oil dye, it almost seems to never dry on the edge until you get that top coat on. Be sure and let that edge dye dry. I would probably let it dry for an hour before you hit it with that even tan coat. As mild as it is, and it's not very harsh, it'll still pick that dye up. And if you've got a nice clean light colored liner on the back side, you'll smear black dye. So when I do it, what I'll do is tan coat, do my liner first, flip the belt over, do the body of the belt with my tan coat, and get that final coat on there, and then I'll stand the belt up on its edge and just go along the edge with that tan coat on black. Because when you do that with that tan coat, even after an hour of sitting there, you'll look at your woolskin pad and there'll be a black streak in there. And so that's why I'm saying if you're gonna edge coat your edges, be sure and do the liner, the top, and then your edge. Don't do just all over and try to get it, because if you touch that edge too much, you can pick up some of that black and then smear it into your liner, and it's kind of difficult to get out of there. So that's the only thing to be careful with black. Now, if you get into other colors, I don't know a whole lot about other colors, but usually black is the only one that's a pain. Any of the other colors that I've used, I've never had an issue with bleeding or picking it up or smearing it. So you should be good to go. You can use any color you want on edging. I used to use mahogany a lot. Mahogany makes a beautiful edge, very, very classic, and it looks very high quality. It looks very pretty. I've just gotten to where now I use dark brown antique on almost everything, so I just kind of stick with the dark brown dye. To me, those two fit together pretty well. But that's dyeing edges on a belt. I hope that helps. Remember the way you grip it, and then just being sure that you're going easy. Don't use too much dye in your dobber. If you got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll see y'all in the next video, and I appreciate it. Be sure and subscribe while you're here. Thank you.